Hello. Oh, there it goes. Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome to episode 2 of season 2. I have with me Dr. 𝗔𝗄𝗏𝗏, who will be joining us about her experience. So thank you all so much for joining. If you're catching us on the replay or here with us live, let us know, where are you watching from? Let us know what city and state. Love to hear some folks and their experiences. So hello, everyone. My name is 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏. I'm the host of the Awesome Careers podcast show, where we feature different careers, different professionals coming on to talk about their experiences, their training, and what they do for a living, and giving us some tips and tools on how to get started in this career path. So thank y'all so much for joining me tonight. I know it's probably dinner time, so feel free to grab your food, heat it up, and tune in. Love to hear your thoughts and ideas. And I'm so glad that you're able to catch this session with us. So without further ado, let me introduce you really quick to Dr. Xiong. So tonight we're going to hear from Dr. 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏, who is a licensed psychologist with a PhD in counseling psychology. Dr. Xiong specializes in multicultural issues and trauma-informed care. Her work focuses on historical trauma experiences in the Hmong community and managing stress, as well as thoughtful strategies like mindfulness and reduction techniques. She is also a 2019 Bush Fellow and committed to advancing the culturally appropriate mental health services for the Hmong community. In her free time, she loves to write and travel. In addition to that, she's also a proud mother of 2. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Dr. Xiong in. If you have questions for her throughout our time, feel free to pop them in chat and let us know. What are some questions you have for Dr. Xiong? We love to share that and then kind of answer some of your quick questions right there and then. All right, let's come on in. And really quick, Spoiler Forecast Podcast is here. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate that. Awesome. Okay, let's see if I can pull in Dr. Xiong really quick. Hi, Dr. Xiong. You're on mute. Just really quick. Just give you a heads up. Let's see. There you go.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? Yes, we can hear you.
Hi.
Awesome. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yes.
I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's you're a different part of the world, and you're tuning in from St. Paul, Twin Cities areas, Minneapolis, and Minnesota. So really appreciate your time and energy. I know that, it's probably a little different there. I'm out here in California, so it's still sunshine outside technically.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely different here. It's dark out right now, and then we also have a thunderstorm. It's been storming outside, so.
Okay, so hopefully we'll have you with us, and hopefully there's no technical issues.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. We have a lot of questions for Dr. Xiong, and Folks, if you're tuning in just now, feel free to put in comments and chat. Let us know what city and state you're coming from. And if you have any questions, let us know in chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. Okay, so Dr. Xiong, really quick, just to give us all an idea a little bit more. I know I kind of mentioned your bio a little bit already, but if you can kind of share with us a little bit more about how did you become interested in this field of becoming a, licensed psychologist and, doing trauma work? What really started that, idea for you or this career path for you?
Yeah, so I think that naturally I've always kind of been a listener. I've always been very interested in hearing people's stories and, just really like supporting people and being there for people. I didn't actually get exposed to the field of psychology until my undergrad. I was in a Psychology 101 course, and it just really opened up my mind to like, wow, human behavior, and just being so intrigued by that. And then I just kept taking psychology courses, and it just felt like something I was, always excited to go to class, and I always was so interested in learning more. And then specifically, I took a trauma-informed class that really kind of opened up my eyes to exploring kind of my own experiences as a Hmong person, and knowing that my parents were refugees and went through so much trauma. I think it just allowed me to have such a better understanding for my experiences and my parents' experiences. And then once like those doors started opening up, I just, again, I just felt like it was truly my calling to keep pursuing and keep learning more, and just a deep desire to figure out how do I come back with the skills to do this for my community. So
that's really wonderful. So take us through a little bit more. So you did your undergraduate, you got your bachelor's over there, and then you went straight into a PhD program. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
And so when you decided to, what made you, and what's the difference between, like, for example, choosing, did you explore, like, for example, a master's program? And what was this decision between that uniquely brought you to the PhD program?
Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting one, because I think that people don't realize that you can do that you can jump from a bachelor's degree straight into a PhD program. And I didn't know that, but I was in the McNair program at my school, which really just helps to like underserved populations to build the skills to apply to graduate programs. And so at the time, I was just applying to several master's programs. For me, I already knew that I was getting my degree in psychology, and also knowing that in the field of psychology, it's really hard to get any jobs with just a bachelor's. You pretty much have to go to graduate school if you want to get a job or a career with that degree. So I knew I was gonna, continue and pursue my graduate degree. And then when I was told that like I could apply to PhD programs, I was like, okay, well, might as well go all the way. And my thought process was like, worst case scenario, they won't accept me into the PhD program, and they'll take me in at the master's level. And so I just kind of went on applying, and I did get accepted into PhD programs, and it was really exciting. And for me, the reason I really wanted to pursue a PhD was because I really felt like there was a need to explore the concept of mental health within the Hmong community. And I felt like there was a gap in the literature and in knowledge of specifically how does this apply to the Hmong experience. And so I knew that it was going to be the PhD level that was going to allow me to do the research and allow me to kind of make an impact and an influence to kind of fill in the gap. And so that's kind of how that journey started.
Well, thank you so much for shining some light on that. I think that really helps, really contributes to again that decision making that you talked about. So how long did it take you to do your PhD? We heard the stories of like how some folks can take 7 years, as fast as I've seen 3 years. What was it like for you?
Let's see. I can't even keep track of how long it took me now, but it definitely took me some time. So I want to say it was 5 years of coursework. So when I got into the PhD program, I did have to take 1 year of master's level courses just to kind of get caught up. And then it was 4 more years of coursework. And then I completed my dissertation another year. And then I finished my internship year. I think it was about 7 years.
7 years.
Say.
So right about the
Yes.
ballpark. Would you say that that's normal for most people who are doing a PhD in like behavioral health or social
I would say,
sciences?
yes, I would say in social sciences. Well, I think that the difference is within my field of psychology and counseling, because we do clinical work, then it's not only the researching and the academic stuff, but then we're also doing the clinical stuff. And so it really depends on your program and what your end goal is, because there's a lot of programs that are just straight academic and research. There are a lot of programs that are just straight clinical. And I think those programs are a lot shorter, like way shorter. But because my program was very much a combination of both, then it kind of just, you know, half of the time was academics and half of the times was actually being in the field and doing clinical work. So I think it depends. And I know that if you want to do research and clinical work, then it's going to probably take you twice as long.
So we're looking at 7 years for you for your PhD program, from the first day you started all the way until the day you finish. That's 7 years, and then 4 years of undergrad. So we're looking at 7 plus 4. Let's go. 10 plus years.
Like, my whole adult life.
Wonderful. And you know, congratulations. That's a huge milestone, and it's a lot of commitment. You know, I think people forget sometimes, like, it takes stamina, a lot of mental stamina to do a lot of schooling for, especially if you did it back to back too. Like you mentioned, you know, going from the bachelor's level to the PhD and having to do the graduate level courses, and then linking into, you know, your internship and your thesis and research. It's a lot of energy.
It is. It absolutely is. It was definitely the long haul, but looking back, it flew by. It's amazing how quickly, like now when I'm looking back, but looking forward, it was just like, it was never going to end.
Wonderful. I'm glad that things are coming along really well. And I'm wondering if you can shine the light a little bit more about what a licensed psychologist does versus like, you know, like for example, what do you do in your work? So essentially, like what does a typical day look like for you, right? What are your job responsibilities that you do?
So it's, you know, it's really interesting because I think that if you go into psychology, the spectrum of the work that you do is just so big and so broad. And so with my PhD, I think that a lot of folks go into research and go into academia. I wanted to experience the clinical work as well. And so with that, I did go and get licensed to do the clinical work. Not everyone with a degree in psychology at the doctoral level decides to go get licensed. And so I kind of do a little bit of everything. I think I spent like early on in my career, I went straight clinical. I went into a postdoc program and basically did your stereotypical kind of like expectations of a psychologist, like just seeing clients on an individual basis and in a group setting, and doing a lot of talk therapy, kind of just talking through people's problems kind of 1 hour at a time. So that's kind of the work that I love to do, is just to sit down and have that one-on-one or that group interaction. On the flip side, the clinical work involves a lot of paperwork, depending on the circumstances. So if you are someone who takes insurance, then you have a ton of paperwork to just get, you know, your things billed and to get paid. And so there's a lot of documentation that happens. If you're in private practice and on your own, you still have documentation, but it's not as extensive because you don't have to respond to insurance or to a specific agency about what you're doing necessarily.
So that's really interesting to know, because I don't think most people realize that, with graduate, you're going to have to do paperwork at one point. It doesn't matter what. You're going to have to do it. And I think that with being the licensed clinical psychologist, you get to do, practicing in the field versus like working with clients, like you mentioned, whether it be one
Yeah.
hour group session or, 1 hour session or a group session,
Yes.
versus other people with a PhD who may be just doing research, right? Who may be gathering data and information, but who are not actually counseling or, addressing their clients or patients right there and then.
Yes, exactly.
So that's really wonderful. And I think that distinguishes it a little bit more to help people understand why they should go for the licensure if they really want to be able to working directly with clients. And I think that's really helpful, is understanding, and you and I talked about it earlier too, is understanding like your client, your population you want to work with, right? So in this case, you knew that you wanted to work with people, but particularly a specific group of people or groups of people who are experiencing certain, challenges. So in this case, like mental health, particularly with trauma.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you, and I think that what you brought really was important, was highlighting about like in the Hmong community, there isn't a lot of literature about that. What do you think is the reason why there isn't literature about that right now?
I think it's a number of things. Number one, I just don't think that there's a lot of researchers out there who are focused on, just understanding the unique experience of the Hmong, and how the Hmong people kind of connect with this idea and this concept of mental health. That's a very loaded question, but I also think that, we are fairly new refugees, coming in, and connecting with the concept of mental health is a very Western concept. And so it's trying to figure out then, like, how do we culturally adapt those concepts to feel like it is related, or that it's helpful for the Hmong people. And so I feel like that's a huge part of why there's such a gap too. But yeah, I think like with anything, I think there's just a lot of underrepresentation of the Hmong experience.
Right. And I think that the work you're doing, which we'll highlight a little bit more, is going to really be able to start chipping away at that, right? Filling in the gap a little bit more about why we need more researchers, people to pursue and explore what's happening for communities who are experiencing trauma, and particularly the Hmong community. And I wanted to kind of shine a little bit light, because we're going to talk about some really cool stuff in a bit, but can you tell us a little bit more about like some also like the rewards of being, a licensed clinical psychologist, some of the things you really do? Because people hear the word trauma, right? And they're thinking, oh my goodness, sounds really heavy. But what are some of the great things that you actually seen in your work that rewards you, that says, you're in the right place, this is your calling, and as well at the same time, like some of the challenges that you face in your work, when you're in this field, besides the paperwork.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like what's truly rewarding is kind of just being able to witness the healing process. Like, I find it to be such a privilege that like there are folks who are just willing to be so vulnerable with me and to share, some things that they never talked about before, and to see, to work with someone and to be part of someone's journey, and to see at the end of it, kind of just all the meaning and significance that they make of their experiences. It just, it feels so good. It's such a powerful experience to have over and over with folks, to just kind of be part of that journey with people. So again, I feel like naturally I enjoy listening to stories, and it brings me a lot of joy to be able to support people, and so being able to do that work is just very rewarding for me personally, and it feels like it carries a lot of purpose and meaning for me in my personal life. So those are the rewards, I would say. Some of the challenges of my work, I think that the first thing is just getting a handle on the paperwork. It's quite the opposite of what I do when I'm like actually, in session with folks. But like the paperwork is rough, because it's very just having to document everything all the time, every single session. It can pile up and just become like very overwhelming if you don't like to do a lot of technical writing. So that's definitely a skill that like I had to develop. I love writing, but more creative writing, and the technical writing stuff is just like, it's rough. It was rough for me. It still is rough for me. But it's a skill that you can develop like anything else. And then I would say that the other challenge, I think, for me, making some waves in the multicultural and understanding multicultural issues is that like a lot of different fields, the history of the field is very much influenced by the voices of white men. And so at the PhD level, when you're trying to make an influence in the field and you're talking about different experiences, I think that you face some of those very challenging conversations with regard to underserved, underprivileged communities, and how this is a different experience for people of color. And so I think those are some of the challenges, is just challenging some of the systems and the structures that's already in place that doesn't actually serve certain communities. It's a challenge, but it's also very rewarding to be able to get to do that and to be able to chip away at some of the systems that like really aren't helping certain communities.
That's really good. I really appreciate that, because I think sometimes, again, the work is gonna be, I tell folks, everyone works hard, right? But sometimes in the work, there are systems in place that challenges the work we do, the way we're able to deliver it. We talk about like where do people care? Where do they put their energy and time in? And that's gonna speak a lot to, the work that you can do in your role, get the rewards and the challenges.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing a little bit about that. And I see it looks like Cherry is here with us. Cherry Yang, I thank you for sharing your time with us today. Thank you so much. Absolutely.
Yes, of course.
So a little bit more, I know we're diving a little bit deeper. Now, give us an idea about you mentioned, you work with a lot of the communities and individuals who experience a lot of trauma. What's the age group like that you see from the youngest client you serve to like some of the older ones?
Yeah. So I had the experience working with all age groups from young kids to adults, but I've really kind of grown into just being more of an adult psychologist. I love children, and there's people who are like awesome child psychologists, and I'm just not one of them. It's really hard work doing a lot of family systems work. I work mostly with 18 and over, and every age range, really. I've worked with young adults who are just starting college, trying to figure out their identity, all the way to I worked in VA systems where I worked with a lot of veterans in retirement, a lot of Vietnam veterans, and so it's kind of a very wide range of folks.
And so thank you for giving us a spotlight a little bit more about the age groups that you work with. Now, I'm wondering what has been and what do you think are some of the top 2 to 3 mental health challenges, that you think the Hmong community is experiencing right now? What do you think attributes to that?
So I would say the number one thing is just a lot of unresolved historical trauma, and that looks very different in different people. So I think a lot of our elders suffer from PTSD, which has a whole set of symptoms that involve like anxiety and flashbacks and nightmares and re-experiencing of the trauma that they experienced, and how that often shows up in other folks is just kind of depression and anxiety. And then with that, so I view everything from a trauma lens. So even issues of like substance and alcohol abuse,
Mm-hmm.
I think is related oftentimes to trauma and like a dysregulated nervous system. When we understand how trauma is not just something mental, but that it actually affects the wiring of our brain and affects then how our body responds to our environment.
Mm-hmm.
That those who experience trauma will uh, have like just experience more of the fight or flight response. And so I see a lot of like the substance and alcohol use as a way to cope with
Mm-hmm.
like a dysregulated nervous system to try to just cope with feeling on edge all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And then again, everything related to in my lens, trauma. We see a lot of issues with domestic violence and suicide in our community. And I think that unresolved trauma actually shows up first in our intimate romantic relationships. And a lot of us don't know that. But I do believe that, with a lot of the domestic violence issues that we've seen, that we've been seeing in our community, is really related to people not knowing how to properly cope with
Mm-hmm.
their traumas and having dysregulated nervous systems, and then kind of really re-traumatizing one another in these types of relationships. So if I haven't made myself clear, I think that trauma is a big one that's impacting our community.
Right. And leading to my next question, I appreciate you for sharing that insight, whether it be, like trauma being the primary and how it emerges
Uh-huh.
in people's experiences can actually come from, go towards the lens of alcohol abuse or drug abuse,
Yeah.
anxiety, right,
Mm-hmm.
depression, and PTSD for folks who don't know as post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And
Yes.
so these are some of the things that has emerged more significantly in our community that we've seen probably, would you say, like the last 5 years or 10 years, kind of a little bit more so now than ever before. I think it happened, but we just never had a place or, like I said, a language to really talk about it
Yeah.
because it's never something most families would not talk about.
Yeah, there's definitely that. And I think that just with social media and the internet now, I think we just have more access to information and like
Mm-hmm.
news about what's going on in our community. So, I think that it's something that's kind of always been around our community for as long as, we've had to transition into the US and continue to carry our past traumas. I think that um, we have so much more access to those stories now.
Yeah. And what would you say is your like theoretical lens in counseling? Like, when you're working
Hmm.
with people who do experience trauma, what is your theoretical foundational that you utilized? And like, for example, techniques and strategies that you use to
Yeah,
help people cope or develop like coping mechanisms, how to address the
yeah,
primary issue that's being presented here.
yeah. So I think it really depends on the person and what
Mm-hmm.
they're presenting with or what they're needing. But I think that I definitely take more of like um, an eclectic approach, but like, so what that means is basically a mix of like a lot of different theories, depending on what the person needs. But I fall back on acceptance and commitment therapy a lot because I think that it's kind of all encompassing, whether I'm dealing with depression or PTSD or something very specific. It applies, and also I think that it really fits well with the Hmong lens because it's more about understanding like life lessons through metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that like the being, we have such an oral tradition of sharing of storytelling, and I think that that's very healing for us. That I think that it's a great fit when working with the Hmong community, and so That's what I do. And then like basically I, have a trauma lens. And so I really work to help people regulate their nervous system
Mhm.
to educate people on what trauma means or what that looks like, or,
Mhm.
how that affects the body. And then like, how do we cope with our bodies? How do we become more in tune with our bodies so that we can actually like shut off our nervous system when there's not an actual threat there. And so
Mhm.
that's where I use a lot of like mindfulness
Mhm.
approaches. But yeah, that's very specific language that I think therapists know. But if you're still just getting into it, there's just a huge, amount of like tools that you can learn and get trained in
Mhm.
to practice in your work.
Right. And for folks who are wondering, where do I get this? Well, that's why grad school prepares you to. And they'll teach you the theories, they'll teach you, like
Yes.
different approaches and techniques and helping you
Yeah.
understand like what is a tool that's a more ideally utilized. So for example, like the
Mm-hmm.
one that Dr. Xiong mentioned about storytelling, right, would be, for example, would you agree that it is something more ideal for folks who are much older who actually can articulate that versus children, right? Children's really hard. They don't have the
Yes.
language yet, the vocabulary, right? Their vocabulary is
Yes.
very limited. So for them, play therapy, for example, or
Yes.
art therapy is a little bit more ideal because,
Yeah.
again, their language is not as fully developed yet.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. And I want to quickly Bao's here with us too. Hi, Bao. Thank you for joining us tonight. And
Hello.
then Ong also is joining us as well. So thank y'all so much, folks, for coming on in, joining us tonight. And again, if you have questions for Dr. Zhang, feel free to pop them in chat. We love to hear from y'all. So, and I'm wondering now that we're talking a little bit more to some of the juicy parts or some of the things that I think might be helpful for to us as a community to help us understand a little bit more, is that we've seen in last week's episode, I talked about, some of the really fast thing that's happening right now across the nation, as we've all sort of seen a little bit more about the in Afghanistan, where new refugees are, at the political level in the world, that's happening. We're going to be admitting into the U.S. a new group of refugees. And for some of us, like you mentioned, it could be a bit traumatic. I think I talked about it last time where I'm not probably that emotional at work. I'm a fairly strong person. And I remember we went to a meeting one day. It was either a Monday or Wednesday. That's when we have our meetings. But, and they asked us about our experience. And I thought, oh my gosh, I haven't verbalized it. You actually processed it enough.
Yes.
And I broke down and I actually cried. I cried because I I never experienced the plane or like living in the refugees. I was born in Thailand in refugee camps. I was such a baby, and my parents already brought me over, so I never get to experience their experience. Their experience represents a lot of, I think many of our Hmong parents and grandparents who experience that type of trauma where, they were left behind. This is the group that was left behind who did have to make the big crossing over the Mekong River to Thailand in hopes of, finding a better life, hoping that they survive. And so this is that population where, they did experience heavy trauma and, being resilient as they are, they come to the United States, and they fought for a better life, whatever means that they can. And as children of refugees, I realized that, we experience a trauma, but our trauma is a little different, I correct me if I'm wrong, the terminology is inherited trauma, where, you may not have experienced it directly, but it's a shared experience, a community experience.
Yeah. So there's a lot of distinctions in like what that's called. So there's the generational trauma where you kind of inherit your parents' experiences, your parents' traumas. And then historical trauma is more about a collective, entire community who goes through the same thing. So it's all kind of means the same thing. But yeah, absolutely. It's so normal to, to see those images, of folks trying to get on the plane and to be re-triggered because we know that story, right? Like that's a very deeply personal story. And so it's very normal to experience a lot of grief and empathy and sadness for those folks because, it's easy for us to kind of move on with our lives and like, try to numb out or forget about things that have happened, but then to see it happening all over again, it's kind of makes that reality, it hits that reality back of like, wow, this truly happens. And we know for a fact that it's a real story because we went through it ourselves. And so it's a lot of grief that can come up. I found myself having to stay away from social media because I just couldn't, it's just too hard to keep seeing those stories on my newsfeed over and over again. And they're important stories, but and people are affected in different ways. Some people can just feel completely numb to it. And I felt like, that initial grief and like just feeling very like overwhelmed and kind of like, okay, like I need to kind of recenter myself and reground myself, because when those feelings come up, it can be really hard to cope with because it is so deeply painful.
Right. And I'm wondering, like, as we're preparing, right? I guess my next question is, what can our community do, right, to support one another and who are experiencing this, re-traumatization of, being left behind, or who, let's like, for example, our parents and grandparents who did experience that. What can we do now if we're able to reconnect or open these conversations up a little bit? So that way, regardless if they are experiencing or not, there's at least an opportunity to sort of like, I guess maybe do some healing or do some sort of outreach to reconnect a little bit more.
Yeah. So I think that the first thing is just being able to identify grief right away, that it's absolutely normal, as we're seeing these images and these stories, to experience whatever emotions come up for you, and to be able to name it, because part of the issue is that our story in particular has been silent and kept a secret for so long. It's kind of like, are we even allowed to experience these things or these feelings? And the truth is that the healing process requires us to validate our emotions, for us to acknowledge what we're feeling and to be able to just hold space for that. There's no right or wrong feeling, but that we can hold space for it, and it's natural and it's normal. And if our parents or our elders feel triggered by those images in those stories, that we can just acknowledge that this is very painful, that there's a lot of grief, and that there's a lot of we can connect to those stories. So that's the first thing, is just to acknowledge your feelings and to validate that it's very normal to feel that way. The second thing I think that is important to do is to be able to tell our story and to connect with to offer a space for storytelling. So if our elders or our parents feel open to sharing, wow, I remember back in the day when I went through this, to have just a caring, compassionate, listening ear, and to just hear someone talk about what their experience was like, is very healing. We are very resilient. Humans are very resilient. So it may seem like, well, is that going to be helpful, or is that too scary to share this stuff? But the truth is that when we are able to get our story out and to share and to have someone listen and acknowledge it, then it becomes very powerful. So that's the second thing, is to share our stories. And then the third thing I would say is to we inherit our past traumas, but we also inherit a lot of our past wisdom. And so I always kind of make that a point, that we have all of this insight and this knowledge from our experiences, as traumatic as they are, having been through it, our people having been through it, we probably have the most insight into what new refugees need right now, how to support them, what they went through, how to advocate for them, how to just basically based off of our own experiences. And so if you're in a position to, I think that tapping into the wisdom that the knowledge that from our own stories and our own perspectives, how can we go out there and use our work and our gifts to be able to share that wisdom and that knowledge to change things, because it's basically history repeating itself, because we probably don't have folks in positions of power who have insight into what those experiences are like. And as we're, our generation is coming of age to a place where we are becoming professionals, or, we're in these positions and we can start influencing the system, that we have a voice, and that like our wisdom is important in figuring out what mistakes were made and how do we can prevent that in the future.
Absolutely. And I think that's so spot on. Folks, just like you're saying, like, our community has been in a place where we were the refugees coming in. We didn't have zero, for some of us,
yes,
didn't have the language or didn't know how to do things, right? And I'm amazed too. At the same time, I'm always like, oh my gosh, I don't know how my parents and grandparents did it. They came to this country with nothing, right? With nothing, like no, not like they didn't speak the language. They know how to, somehow they figure out how to navigate getting a license, to drive, right? And so I just think how powerful that was to be able to have community of support, for someone to teach you the ropes and let you know, like, this is how to do things. And really, like, I think that what you're saying, the first is acceptance that, they're here, their experiences are real, and, and it emerges differently. Like you mentioned, it might be children who are experiencing, the war-torn crime that's happening. My parents, like I said, it's also a lot of the grief, like you were mentioning, like the loss of everything they owned, they ever built their lives together on. And I think that your method and your approach here about like storytelling is so powerful. And how folks are probably wondering, I encourage it, folks, you have loved ones at home, families, grandparents, mom, dads, uncle, whoever is still around who experienced those early onset, is, as open that space to storytell. I tell folks, if you got a phone, you can record, ask them and see if they'd be willing to share. But I recognize that not everyone, would you agree that not everyone is ready to share? Because not everybody has that story.
I think that's a great recommendation. If you have your parents and your elders, definitely sit down and make a space to hear their story. Ask them questions. Ask them lots of questions. There are parts that they might not, be open to, and you can get a sense of that. But even just asking, like, what was childhood like for you? What was your favorite thing to do when you were a kid? I find that even just starting off with those questions and opening up that door, that our elders are actually like so excited that you want to hear about my life. But it's about just being a space and being able to hear whatever it is that they are willing to share. And and that's often very therapeutic for them, and also for us. We in learning our own family history, we gain so much wisdom and knowledge from that. So
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And like CS Val says, good insight storytelling can be so therapeutic. Absolutely. I tell folks, regardless if it's in English or in Hmong, right? Just being able to hold that space is definitely a very powerful way to connect with one another, and not judge them. This is a time, like I said, we were probably even born, and so it's a place for them to tell their story in the way that they want to be told.
Yes, exactly.
And I know that Bao, you didn't ask a great question, and Bao mentioned, okay, so recently we're seeing more tragedies, surrounding young adults. Not sure if it's due to stress of COVID. We identify some troubling signs, especially when they are not the obvious ones we hear about, like depression. So yes, we are seeing, I think Dr. Xiong mentioned about like suicide in our community. Those are just examples of things that it's emerging more and more so. And this is, would you say that, for example, with people in the, right now we're still in the pandemic, it's not over.
Yes.
As people are, working and living remotely and not having that social interaction that we would, typically do on the weekend, or, reconnect. Do you believe, or do you think, what attributes again to sort of these isolations?
I think that the pandemic is taking a toll on everyone. And what it does is it takes away our normal coping strategies, right? We aren't able to connect, during the time when we were all in lockdown, we weren't able to connect with everyone and socialize the way that we used to. We weren't able to continue doing like events and celebrations, and what we know about depression and leading to suicide is that it's a combination of like risk factors and kind of resiliency factors, and so and trying to balance each other out. So if someone has less access to coping strategies, they feel less supported by the people around them, they're experiencing more stress, and they're struggling with depression or anxiety, that these things just stack up against someone. And so the more and more of that someone experiences, the more hopeless it can feel for someone. And so I don't remember what the question was, but I would definitely say that we are seeing like a high prevalence of that in our community. And I think it's a combination of like the stress factors. And I think a huge part of that, of the Hmong experience, is trying to navigate the two different worlds of like Hmong culture and American culture, and like that identity struggle that a lot of young people go through. I think is a huge part of what can lead someone down a path of, just experiencing significant depression as well.
Right. And so what would you recommend that folks do in order to start building those coping mechanisms, right? What can we do now in
Yeah.
like COVID times to build our coping mechanisms so that way we do start, like building that support system that we would normally have? Like, for example,
Yeah.
like once a month, you might have a girls' night out, or you might do a
Yes.
meetup with moms, or you might do,
Yes.
movie night, right? Things that, social places. What can people continue to do or try doing to build those coping mechanisms?
Yeah, so I think that identifying what coping strategies would work for you requires you to kind of look inward and ask yourself, like, what brings you like peace and calm and relaxation? Because for some people, it might be like finding ways to connect with people and socialize, and do like get-togethers, and like during our lockdowns, like Zoom gatherings, right? For some people, it might be like figuring out what your unique hobbies are, like drawing or writing or reading, and really spending time doing that. And then I think the other thing is, having a close support system, even if it's just one person who you trust, who knows has your back, and who knows will not judge you, to be able to connect with and talk about what you're struggling with, and to kind of sometimes when you're in that place of anxiety or depression, it can feel like a tunnel, like where you just can't see your way out, and having someone else light the way, or to be like, there is, this time will pass, I think is really helpful. And then I think that if you find yourself like unable to just get yourself out of it, if you've tried all your typical strategies that usually helps you, and it's just like you're going through an extended period of time where it's just like not helping, everything that you do is just like you can't get out of it, I think that looking into professional services can be really helpful to help you kind of understand, what is happening to you, and to figure out like what we can do to guide you into that healing process. So yeah, that would be my suggestions.
That's really great. And I'm glad people are thinking about that. There's been a prediction, and I don't remember the article, but there's been a prediction that, post-pandemic, assuming that, we're able to fully move on and things will get back to some form of normalcy, where, we can look back at and go, wow, in our lifetime, we actually get to, we experience a pandemic. There's an expectation potentially that, I'm sorry, not expectation. What is it? A forecast that, in the next 5 to 10 years, we will actually see more mental health clinicians that hiring needs, because everyone, the whole world. So it's not just something that's isolated here out in California or Minnesota.
Right.
It is a world. I think going back to what we were talking about, the historical trauma that everyone, it's a shared experience that everyone here experienced the pandemic, and
Yeah.
that, you know, when we later on go through our lives and realize that regardless if we process it now in today's time, like during the pandemic,
Yes.
that it will emerge a little bit more later on when we go do our things, and that we will look back and actually realize that, you know, some of us will probably cope well, right? Some of us will
Yeah.
move on through our day in our lives and transition, and others will struggle, where it, like you mentioned, you know, like if you find yourself depressed, you find yourself not being able to enjoy the things you do, and you're having difficulty, you know, sort of like analyzing it and finding solution, that, you know, you might seek a more professional help. And that,
Yes.
you know, this leads to, again, going the increasing needs across in terms of careers,
Yeah.
that, you know,
Yes.
this might be actually where there's going to be a higher need of mental health
Yes.
clinicians in all aspects. So not just, for example, I think going back to like what a clinical licensed psychologist does, not just in the private practice, but maybe, for example, at the hospital, in hospice,
Yes.
in government county roles, or
Yeah.
and school sites, all across the different spaces where people are engaged in, is that we're going to be seeing a higher need. And this can be very exciting for many people who are working with people,
Yes.
like behavioral technicians to you know, therapists, psychologists. So do you find that a bit exciting, or is it more like, you know, we expect this, we will see this trend and it's expected?
Yeah, no, it's really exciting, because I think that when I was starting off, like getting my degree in psychology, my bachelor's in psychology, I had a lot of people say, like, what are you going to do with that psychology degree, right? Like, how many people do you know actually get a job with a psychology degree? And, you know, and then specifically in the Hmong community, it's just such a foreign concept. So it's like, what do you mean? Is it not like a medical doctor? You know, like just a lot of, you know, so during those times, it was just like, I don't know what we're going to do with this degree. But I think that definitely during these times and with the pandemic, what it did was I think, just like propelled our understanding of mental health and how significant it is, and how it impacts everything from, you know, in our behaviors, from like taking medication, being on treatment, like all the physical health issues, to like we need it in schools, and like all the students and what they're coping with and dealing with. That like every single space, to even just like the workplace, you know, like how significant it's going to become to understand people's mental health, because we're living during a time where the culture is changing, and people care more about their lifestyle and maintaining their mental health than they do about like you know, just like working forever, you know, because there's such a huge awareness of mental health now, and that it's not sustainable, you know. And so I think with that, I definitely see how much more we're talking about mental health in the mainstream, how much more we're talking about mental health in the Hmong community, how much more everyone's talking about mental health. And with that, I've seen, you know, a lot of therapist friends that I know, that their caseloads are full, you know, that places are hiring, that like there's such a strong, huge need for folks in this field now. So I would definitely say that it's a growing field, and it's, you know, it's a much needed field to kind of get into.
Absolutely. So now's the time. Now is the time to
Yes,
capitalize
now's
and
the time.
capture that. So I
Yes.
know we're heading towards the end now. Gosh, time goes by so fast.
Yes,
So
that was
can you
fast.
tell us a little bit more? Well, before we go into Hmong mental health or wellness, because I know that's something that you're passionate about, that you do.
Yeah.
But I always love to throw this question out a little bit more, just because I come from, you know, I'm curious. Does your parents, your family, right, mom and dad, do they understand, and your siblings, do they understand what you do for a living? All right. Do they understand that, oh, you know, you go talk to
That's a great
people,
one.
or like, how would they describe the work you do?
Oh, that's a fun one. So my parents have been listening over the years, and I had no idea that like they knew the extent of what I did, but I think that they did their research a little bit. And I was just talking to my dad, and I was like how would you even like describe psychologists in Hmong? And he was like, oh, it's like either 𝗪𝒩𝗪𝒃, and that like you know, that the people that you meet, 𝗂𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗀𝗂 and like
Mhm.
all this stuff, and he's like describing it, and I'm like, wow, you've been paying attention, like, you
That's
know.
awesome.
Yeah. I was like, okay, you like you've been listening. And so yeah, like they kind of get it, or like they have a better understanding of like what I do.
Mhm.
And then I would say like the rest of my family, my siblings, I mean, I think that they just all like think that I just do what's like stereotypical of like um a psychologist, that like I talk to people, you know.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, I think that they hear my spiel like all the time. Like my husband hears my mental health and psychology talk all the time, that he's just kind of like, okay, I get it. Like, I get it. We got to work on communication right now, or like whatever. But like, yeah, I think they get a sense of what I do, but it's kind of funny.
Well, I'm so proud. I think that's wonderful. And I think that we say it more, we speak it to our community members, our families, our loved ones,
Yes.
then that language opens up. Because I think that, with the stigma of, mental health and well-being, people
Yes.
always thought that, you only go see counselors or therapists if something was wrong
Yes.
with you. And people always assume that,
Exactly.
like, and it was sort of like, again, this language, like, like the
Yes.
word you say, 𝗂𝗄𝗄, or like 𝗂𝗄𝗄,
Yes.
or, those are
Mm-hmm.
words that actually exists in our language, but you don't
Yeah.
hear, you don't see it being utilized in the way that says to seek support of.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that makes a very
Exactly.
powerful way of introducing, again, the more we say it, the more we can really help our community better about taking care of one another and seeking
Yeah.
support and not be judged by it.
Yes.
I've always had
Exactly.
one of my professors who I think I said it last season, where there's two type of people in this world. They're either dead or dysfunctional, right? And so and I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
everyone
that's pretty
else is, yeah, that's
accurate. There
all
you
of us, right? We're
go.
dysfunctional.
Yes.
And to take the ownership that, we're not perfect and we're gonna come
No
across some
one.
challenges in that. And I
Yes.
think that, the work that you're doing to help people develop or, reimagine their
Hmm.
own coping mechanism is so helpful, especially during this time
Yeah.
and even onwards, about that
Yes.
trauma, about those experiences, and even the trauma we're all experiencing right now. May not,
Yes.
for some of us, may be significantly higher, especially if we had loved ones who, you lost due to
Hmm.
COVID, right?
Yes.
As well as the
Right.
trauma that we're seeing in, like, again, from afar, with what's
Yes.
happening right now with the refugees, Afghanistan refugees
Yes.
coming in. We're all
Yeah.
experiencing these small, big, and traumas, as well as even, like, I think for a lot of the folks early on right now, right, the systems in place, right? Like you mentioned, they're
Yeah.
going to school, they're, the workplace, we're experiencing all big and small. And I think that when we
Yes.
speak about it more, we can really expand and we'll help each other, check on each other a little bit more too. I know our time is
Yeah.
wrapping up, but can you tell us
Yes.
a little bit more? What can we expect to hear and see from more about your work and what you do? How can people
Yeah.
reconnect with you to learn more?
Yeah. So, I'm currently running the page, Hmong Mental Health and Wellness, and kind of like where I'm at right now is that I think that education is healing. That the more knowledge that we have on like what mental health is, what trauma is, what it looks like in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
that the more power we have to take ownership of our lives and to figure out like, oh wow, like there are areas that like I can work on. And it's kind of like exercise, right? Like we wouldn't even care to, wouldn't even be scared to say I'm seeing a personal trainer. They're helping me to like strengthen my muscles or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that mental health is exactly the same way. It's just that it's helping
Mm-hmm.
us to strengthen our like, our mental like thoughts and emotions and feelings, and that like, we can do it on our own. That's fine. And, it's also not a bad thing to go see someone who specializes in this, who's a professional in this, who can really help you, guide you in figuring out how do I strengthen my coping strategies and strengthen, these ways to kind of cope with life. And yeah, and so that's kind of what I'm doing right now is I think that education is so core into destigmatizing mental health and to really identifying with like what does mental health look like in the Hmong community? You know, like how do
Yeah.
I connect with that as a Hmong person? And so that's kind of what I'm doing. So if you're interested in learning more, you can head on over to that page. And I'm not that active on there, but I try to be as much as I can because I think that education piece is just so crucial in healing.
That's wonderful. And folks, if folks don't know, it's Hmong Mental Health Wellness on Facebook. So that's specifically the site. And I highly recommend go by, give Dr. Xiong a follow, a like. You know, we want to support our communities, support our practitioners in the field who's amplifying these voices about what you can do. You know, I tell folks, you don't have to drop a penny. There are different ways to amplify and support one another, whether it's liking, following, sharing the post, sharing a like. That goes a long way to helping someone in your network, you know, who may be needing this resource. And so definitely stop by, give her a thumbs up. So thank y'all so much. Really appreciate that, Dr. Xiong, for sharing your insight tonight about trauma, what trauma looks like, what those coping mechanisms can do to support that, and really how to open up the conversation about these challenges that we're experiencing as a collective group, whether it's the Hmong community or the larger world community, and also individually as well. I love the work that you're doing. I admire your leadership and support. And thank you so much for spending an hour with us and sharing about the work that we're that you're doing. My heart is full when I get excited about seeing professionals who are, like we mentioned, you know, chipping away and doing things that you know we would have never thought. You know, I think most kids probably grew up thinking, you know, I'm going to go college. And you're like, no, I'm going to go college and study the human behavior so I can go back to my community and empower us so that way we can add to the literature. So that way our voices are not silent and it's not told by anyone else but us. And so I thank you for being a pioneer and doing this work. It's not easy work, as you folks heard tonight. You know, it's really heavy topics, you know, really difficult to go through. But the work that you're doing is just so amazing. And I'm so proud of you and the work that you're doing. I can't wait to see more.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much, folks. Go give her a like, a follow. Again, Hmong Mental Health Wellness. Thank you so much, Dr. Xiong. You have a good night.
Thanks. You too.
All right, folks, we heard from Dr. Xiong. Again, just fantastic. Really enjoy her work. And again, if you're interested in learning about the work that she's doing, swing by, give her a follow. She does really great postings highlighting some really cool things about mental health wellness. So I highly recommend her page, especially if you know someone in your community who also can potentially benefit from the resources that she provides. Really quick, I want to spotlight next week. I'm doing create an online portfolio for free. I'm going to show you how to create one. So if you're interested, join our Facebook group. I will be streaming that to a private group. So swing by our page, join the group, and you can get access to where I can show you a whole lot more about how to really develop your portfolio to make you stand out as you're thinking about, you know, applying for jobs, internship, and really amplifying your message about who you are and what you have to offer. So again, it's free, doesn't cost you anything. Join us next Thursday. We're streaming live to our Facebook group, not page, group. And then, of course, really quick, we will also have not next Thursday, but actually closer to September is on the September 18th. I'm sorry, not 18th, 16th, is actually 𝗏𝗏 Xiong, who's going to be joining us. She's a birth doula. She's going to talk about her experience and her training and how her career really allowed her to grow into an era that she loves and thrives in, and how she helps moms deliver their babies. And so if you're interested in that, swing by and check our conversation out in September as well. And then, of course, lastly, for folks who don't know, we already did Dr. Xiong tonight. So if you can catch the replay, you're more than welcome to. It's on YouTube as well. And then lastly, don't forget, if you're interested in learning more about your skills, your abilities, how to amplify and make you a competitive candidate in today's market. Yes, apply in jobs for internships and all that stuff. You can book a session. You know, I go over resumes, cover letters, how to interview, how to negotiate your salary, as well as your strengths, your skill set, all that stuff. You can make a booking today. It's really easy. So check out my link on our website, share with you about a lot of pretty cool strategies, as well as grab grab my free toolkits with resumes, cover letters, and interviewing. When I ask folks, what was some of the things you talked about that struggles you when it comes to finding a job or an internship? Many of you mentioned interviewing. So pick up that toolkit. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. So again, thank y'all so much, everyone, for swinging by. Really appreciate it. And I'll catch y'all next time. Take care of yourself. Drink. Stay healthy. Stay hydrated. And be kind for one another. Bye, everyone.